This is a true story that happened to me when I was around 16 years old. I'm female. I used to roam for hours a day after getting home from school, desperate to escape my fucked up home life for as long as possible. When I say roamed, I mean I walked around my neighborhood until nightfall, and frequently well after dark, depending on how crazy it was at home. There was, and still is, a park in my old neighborhood. It is a gorgeous little marsh preserve, with a little welcome center and a playground, some gardens and trails. It was my go-to sanctuary from all the chaos. To get to the main area of the park, you had to walk a good mile or two on the main access road. I had my Walkman, and would blast angry music so I could burn off steam as I trotted around, pissed at the world. Well, one day, I noticed a black pickup truck driving behind me, slowly. My father was a cop, so I was always paranoid and aware of my surroundings, thanks to all the horrific tales he brought home with him. I decided to size him up and looked him straight in the eye as he finally passed me. The look that this guy gave me was absolutely chilling. He had turned his head all the way around very awkwardly to the right and stared right through me, absolutely white-knuckling the steering wheel as he did. His eyes were strange, like they were different sizes, and one was bulging. He had dark hair, black eyes, and tanned skin. He looked criminally insane, and at the same time wildly hungry somehow. Demonic yearning is the best way I can describe it. I was already halfway into the park at this point, so it's not like I could have turned around and made a break for it. Plus it was broad daylight, and I looked a bit crazy myself. The look I returned back to him was anything but helpless and innocent. As I was thinking this, he pulled over a few yards in front of me and slammed to a halt on the left side of the road, a huge cloud of dirt engulfing the truck. No one else around. What the fuck do I do? I thought to myself. Luckily, coming up on the right was a long path through the woods that led into the back of my neighborhood. My shortcut on a good day. My lifeline today. It went about half a mile through the dense woods before you reached civilization. Thinking on my feet, I made a beeline for it, but remained calm since I had to get close to the truck to access it. Not altering my pace one bit, I turned my music all the way down and just listened. To my horror, I hear the door slam. I only looked back once to verify he was on foot, slowly starting to follow me into the woods with a wild grin plastered on his face. Like it was right where he wanted me to go, and he couldn't believe his luck. Still, I remained calm and even putted around, switching CDs so he would think I was oblivious as we traversed the path together. I felt that if he knew I was onto him, he would just run and tackle me, drag me back to his truck, and have his feast before anyone else came by to see us. I was also checking to see if he would stop when I did, see if I was, in fact, what he was after. He always did. All the while walking through the impossibly quiet woods, I thought to myself, he wants to kill me, simply for the pleasure of it. My destination was so far away, and I felt I couldn't make it before he got to me. I even put on my favorite song, accepting my fate, thinking he was going to kill me right then and there. We were in the middle of the woods now. He picked up speed, so I did too, trying to be subtle about it. I heard the leaves rustle under his feet, and he was getting closer and closer. All I could think was, just keep going. This is not how it ends. Fuck this guy. I'll fight him to the death if I have to. He is not taking me. By the time I had reached the big, downed log at the end of the path, he was so close. I could hear him breathing, an excited, perverted breath. He sounded like he was about to pounce, but I still refused to run until I could get close enough for someone to hear me. Should I have the breath to scream? I felt him reach out. Felt the air change behind me. Cold chopped the air. Fuck this. I picked up speed again. As soon as I hopped over the log and was out of sight, I began to sprint all the way to my house, tasting blood, unable to scream, looking behind me furiously the whole time, hoping someone would see the panic in my eyes and protect me from this madman. He didn't seem to follow, but I wanted to get home before he hopped into his truck and went hunting for me. I made it. For the first time in a long time, it felt like home. What made him stop? It was obvious what he was after with his predatory glares. Was it because I didn't run or show fear? Or he couldn't get it up? Was it too easy? Was it just some asshole messing with me? I never saw him again, and like an idiot, told no one because I didn't want my walk time taken from me. I always carried a knife after that, and I can vividly recall being superstitious afterward, kicking myself for wishing all throughout my childhood for someone to kidnap me and take me away from my messed up family. Be careful what you wish for. This happened to me when I was 11. I was at a restaurant with my family, because my aunt was in from Europe to visit. The day before, she had been telling me about how a female construction worker had been found in the creek close to my grandparents' house, where she was staying. She also told me to always walk in the middle of the sidewalk, so nobody would snatch my ankles and abduct me. Understandably, my mom was opposed to her telling me such things, but I don't think she cared. Anyways, the street the restaurant was on had a few other things to the right. However, on the left there was a wide, poorly lit street. It led down a small area of expensive-ass Italian-style apartments. There's a lot of underground houses, so there are stairs that lead to a lower level pretty much everywhere. At the end of this, there's a fence with a gate that slopes down into a wooded area. Anyways, it's about 8 at night. For some reason, I decide to go out to the car to get my Nintendo DS. I tell my mom I'm going to get it. She sends my cousin, then 16, with me to get it. I felt a little relieved to have her with me because as soon as we got outside, we realized it was almost dark. I told her, "Let's go." But for some reason she refused and told me she'd wait there. I reluctantly agreed and headed down the street. I couldn't help but think about what my aunt had said and remembered to stand straight and to stay alert. As I'm about halfway to where my car is, I get the overwhelming feeling that I should turn around. Behind me, on the opposite side of the street, I see this guy who, I'm guessing, had been waiting in the stairs of one of the lower apartments. He has this creepy walk that looks like he's almost dancing down the street. I turn around and start walking quicker. My initial plan was to reach my car, get inside and lock the doors, and use the horn to signal for help. I look behind me again, and I see the guy cross the street, so we're on the same sidewalk. I try to rationalize it. Maybe this guy's just going the same way as me. I realize there's only about 50 feet left. I feel my heart drop to my fucking stomach because he calls out to me. He says in the creepiest voice I've ever heard, "Hello." The only thing ahead of us is a ditch that leads into a wooded area. Now we're about 15 feet from the gate, and I make a decision. It's clear this dude wants to get me down there, and, as I thought at the time, make me end up like the lady in the creek. It made me so angry, but I was also so terrified. I stopped walking and turned around, and his mouth spreads into a nasty smile. I smiled back, but over-exaggerated. And I opened my mouth slightly. I made sure to keep my eyes as big as possible, and I leaned towards him. I spread my arms with my palms towards him, and make a sound I can only describe as locust-like. I could tell the exact moment he knew he'd done fucked up. I scream louder than I ever have before and start sprinting towards him. I start chasing him back towards the restaurant, only stopping to raise my voice to a high-pitched giggle. Needless to say, dude is scared shitless and is high-tailing the fuck away from me. Almost at the restaurant, he crosses the street and jumps in a raggedy car. He peels out, and I start running back to the restaurant. Bawling, I tell my family what happened. I wasn't even upset about what the guy was doing. I was so horrified of the way I acted, the way I screamed. My piece of shit cousin was inside, at the table. She later apologized and told me she stayed for a bit and didn't see the guy come out. The police were notified, but nothing came of it. I know I was extremely lucky, and what I did was really stupid. He was never found, and I'll never know what he was doing out there and why he was following me. I can't remember exactly how old I was, or how long ago this happened. I'd say maybe about 5 years ago. I'm quite sure my brother was about 15 to 16 at the time, and I'm 2 years younger than him. I'm 18 now, so I was around 13 to 14. Just to give a brief background. Every 2-week break we'd have from each term of school, our parents didn't like us home on our own, so we would stay at my grandparents' house, and also help my grandparents babysit my younger cousins. There really wasn't much to do there. No Foxtel, no internet, so we'd just sit in the lounge room watching whatever crap was on free-to-air TV, sit on our laptops playing games, play a game of handball outside, or just rummage around finding snacks and treats to eat. My grandparents are Greek, but they've lived here in Australia for almost 50 years. They're your stereotypical Greek grandparents, with the hoarding of so many tools and old items they do not want to throw away, a concrete jungle for a backyard, and 2 gardens in the front and backyards, filled with all sorts of vegetables and fruits. Our grandparents' house has rear lane access as well as a front, so there are 2 entries to their property. The lane had 2 of those big roller doors, one attached to the garage, and the other just opened up straight to the shelter in the backyard. Very often, they'd leave this door unlocked in case visitors were to come. They knew many people in the neighborhood who would quite often visit them. The roller door is very squeaky and loud when opened, so it's very easy to know if someone has come. That day, my grandparents were expecting my uncle to visit, so of course the back roller door was left unlocked. We were all sitting inside when we heard the door slowly open. We assumed it was my uncle, so we all went outside to greet him. Instead, we saw a hooded figure attempting to sneak into my grandparents' property. My grandma has a room right next to the roller door outside where she keeps all her sewing equipment and some vegetables. It looked like he was trying to go in there and maybe hide. I'm really not sure. When he heard us come outside and the door to the house swing open, my grandfather yelled and my brother grabbed my uncle's softball bat from inside the house and chased him. As soon as he saw this, he ran out the door he came through and ran all the way down the lane with my brother on his tail. Luckily for him, he got away. Now, it was quite silly for my brother, a 15 to 16-year-old, to do that because we still don't know who that could have been, or what he could have potentially done. We never saw his face, but he did have a slim build. Sure, for him to run away like that means he mustn't have any sort of weapons. Or he just got a big fright when he realized there were people home. So a weird hooded guy who probably wanted to rob my grandparents. Let's not meet. I used to work at an elementary school, after-school program in the town I went to college in. The school was known for the type of population it had. Most of the families were low income, many with gang affiliations. The kids were wonderful for the most part, but the surrounding area was awful. We had a good relationship with the police in town, and we would immediately get a call from them if there were any Amber Alerts or known baddies on the loose near us. One day, we were out playing on the basketball courts. A white van with blacked-out windows pulled up down the street. It was pretty beat up, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Most cars that lined the street were ratty anyway. I continued playing with the kids until it was time to go inside for a snack. As we were walking in, one of the kids thought it would be cool to kick the ball as high as he could. The ball flew up high and landed in the street near the van. I escorted the kids inside and went back for the ball. As I headed back, two of the kids from the school were walking home. As they passed the van, it shook a bit. I called out to them to say hello and to enjoy their evening. I went to grab the ball and saw a man jump back in the van. I grabbed the ball and looked up. He was staring right at me. I ran over to the girls and walked them the rest of the way home. I snuck a peek at the license plate as the van sped off. I returned to the school after ensuring the girls got home safe. As I walked in the door, the lady in charge of the program was getting off the phone with the police. They told us to go into lockdown. A man was spotted in the area in a white van. He was suspected of kidnapping and murdering 3 other children in the county. The description matched the man I saw. The van matched. The license plate matched. I immediately called the police back and told them he was there. They searched for him, but never found him. I've since moved away from the town, but murderer, pedophile man, let's not meet. At my elementary school, we usually took 2 or 3 field trips a year. We went to normal places like the zoo, the park, or a historical place. But the school decided to do something out of the ordinary. The school, for some reason, thought a good place for a field trip would be the local jail. Nothing like being 8 or 9 and going to a place where criminals live. My classmates and I were walked to the jail by our teachers. We were greeted by an officer and he began to give us a tour of the jail. We were took to a room and they showed us the cameras around the jail. The tour went on and on. We had reached a pair of metal doors, and the police officer turned to us. He asked something like, "Is anyone uncomfortable seeing the prisoners?" Of course, nobody said anything, and we went inside. He typed in the code and the first set of doors opened. He typed in another password and opened the second set of doors. We walked in and could see the prisoners having lunch behind the glass. We weren't in any danger. They were a few hundred feet away, and there was glass separating us. The glass had to be at least a few inches thick, and it was bulletproof. The officer began to tell us about the food they ate when my friend nudged me. I turned to her. She had a nervous expression. I smiled as she seemed to calm down. I turned my attention back to the officer, only to feel her nudge me again. I mumbled something like, "Pay attention." She started nudging me harder and harder till it felt like she was going to push me over. She whispered my name, sounding panicked. I turned to see what it was, and saw a guy looking at me. This guy had his gaze fixed on me intently. I heard a rustling sound, and looked to see he was wearing handcuffs and leg cuffs. This guy was no more than 40 feet away from us. When I looked back up, our eyes met, and a smile stretched onto his face. The smile reminded me of Ted Bundy. The guy looked around real quickly before starting to walk towards me. He was stopped by the officer leading him, and the others and the police officer with us walked over to me and had his hand on his taser and was looking at the guy as he was dragged into the room. When the field trip was over, my friend told me that one of the guys had put his finger to his neck while smiling at her and made a slicing motion. I have so many questions. Who was that guy? What was he in for? What did he want with me? The questions that will probably never be answered. So, creepy prison guy, let's not meet again. I'm not entirely sure how this happens to me, but if you ask most people I know personally, they will tell you that I have a weird problem with attracting creepazoids. I don't know if it's because I'm rather petite in stature, and perhaps don't look like someone who would fight back, or because I somehow come off as sweet and endearing to people who don't realize they're only getting my customer service face. I get followed around frequently, and have had a few different stalkers. This is exacerbated by the fact that I tend to be a bit clueless at first when someone is being creepy, and will try to give someone the benefit of the doubt. This is one of my more interesting encounters. I was a barista for a while for Starbucks. I've worked in proper Starbucks locations, and also the bastardized versions inside other stores, Safeway, Target, Walmart, you know. The licensed concept stores. This in particular happened when I worked at one of the licensed stores. My manager wanted us to create personal connections by getting the person's name and creating short talk. I'm not great with names, but I have a good eye for faces and remembering a face to a drink. This guy walks up, and he has complete prison tattoos. They're only line art and not good line art. Also, they're from Dungeons and Dragons. I can get down on some D&D. This is going to turn into our talking point. The tattoos are some Egyptian-style gods. Let's say his name is John. I nickname him John the Tattoo Guy. He always gets a venti caramel sauce white chocolate mocha. He begins to come in 3 or 4 times a week. One day, I get a somewhat weird situation. He pauses and stares at me and asks, "Have you been avoiding me?" I laugh. And at the time I didn't realize something wrong was happening. I said, "No, maybe you've been avoiding me. I've been at school a lot." He nods, walks off. My coworker grabs my hand and her voice drops. "He's been coming in here every day looking for you. He checks under the counters." I pause and stare at her and decide that maybe this guy just has some social disorder that makes him a bit awkward. He comes back in about a week later. I'm having a conversation with other customers about donating blood. I've always been a firm believer in donating blood whenever possible. I myself am afraid of needles, but I use it to try to get over my fear. Without a beat, and in a very friendly way, John the Tattoo Guy says, "I can't donate blood." "Oh, why not?" "Are you afraid of needles too?" "No. I have Hep C, but don't worry. You can't get it unless we have really rough sex." Keep in mind, I have only ever had very basic conversations with him. 2-sentence conversations, basically. I laugh nervously, give him his coffee, and go back to making other coffee. Soon after, I have a security guard come over. I almost think he must have heard the conversation. Turns out John the Tattoo Guy was actually stealing from the stores in the area, and the security guy wanted me to flirt with him. to find out where he lived. John, and my old security guard. Let's not meet again, okay? So, I want to first give you all a brief background on how this happened. I'm currently 19 years old, and this incident occurred when I was around 7. Needless to say, I still remember it like it was yesterday. I am from Pakistan, and at the time I was living in a city called Quetta. Now, for those who don't know, Quetta is the city which has the border linking to Afghanistan. It's basically the link between both of the countries. So anyways, we lived there because my father was in the army and we got posted there. It wasn't easy for me as the place is pretty hostile. My mother was a teacher at a school there, and I used to go on the bus with her. One day, my school had this Colour Day party, which is basically students going to the school in civil dress. As we had this uniform, students were allowed to bring one dish and set it all on the table. Then obviously eat. My mother packed me some sandwiches and told me to come to her block when the party is over. She teached in the senior block, so I had to cross all the way over from the school. Wasn't hard or anything. Still was one building. The party ended at around 12 p.m, and I had totally forgotten about what my mother said. I went outside the school like I usually do and wait for the bus. It was 12:30 now, and I started getting worried. I thought I missed the bus. Silly me started to walk in the direction where the bus usually moved. Staying out of the road, of course. I was faced with 2 roads. One went right, the other went left. I had to choose. I went for left. Bad choice. I got a bit ahead and stopped seeing roads, and was more of a deserted place. 7-year-old me did what anyone would have. Started crying. While moving ahead, I walked. And then I saw someone ahead of me. Salam, uncle, Yerasta Kaan Jasta Hai. Which translates to, can you tell me where this road leads? He smiled at me and told me, Bake tum hamare sath chalo. Ye jagathik na hai. Which means, child, come with me. This place is not okay. I looked ahead and saw, like an outpost or something. Barbed wires and walls. People patrolling and stuff. Red flags. These were all red flags for me. I knew I had gone too ahead. I started crying even more. The guy still had the kind of half-smile on his face. His teeth were rotten by eating tobacco. He had this turban, a shawl on his left shoulder, and a shalwar kameez. White. All I said to him was, Mayaya, which means I'll be back. And then I ran the other direction. I just ran. I got a bit ahead and saw my bus, which was surprised to see me there. The bus was dropping other students, and inside was my mother crying. The bus stopped. I hopped on, held my mother and cried. Creepy Pathan, let's not meet. Edit. Pathan refers to ethnic Afghans. Their forefathers lived in Afghanistan. There are a lot of them over there after the whole Afghan war. I'll start by saying I grew up in a small town in England, and, just like anywhere else, everywhere has their fair share of rough areas. In this particular town, the majority are seen as rough. I used to hang out with what I now know as the wrong crowd. These thugs didn't go out to have a good time. They went out to commit crimes, theft, assault, general arseholery. And everyone in the borough knew their names and their reputation. But me and a friend, being the idiots we were, chose to specifically hang around with them. Life lessons, right? Anyway, all of a sudden, for no reason whatsoever, they had turned on us. They'd invite us out and make it seem like they wanted us there. But in fact, it was only to bully and belittle us. And this just got progressively worse. Me and my best mate used to frequent the under-18s nights at the nightclubs around town, and these thugs used to pull outside near closing time to wait for us to come out. At first it was mainly bickering and shouting across the street, but this quickly progressed. Soon it was pushing, scrapping, and attempts to jump us. Basically 10 or more lads attacking one person. But to no avail until one day, they managed to get my best mate and promptly beat the shit out of him right outside the club. I feel so guilty for legging it out of there as soon as it kicked off now. But I never had any hard feelings, and managed to get away somehow, with only a few bumps and cuts. The next encounter is significant. We'd been in an under-18s night, and the nightclub up the road from the last attack, having a great time, thinking they wouldn't know because we had switched venues. But they knew. And because of their notoriety, news spread around the club fast, and we quickly found out that there were 30 to 40 lads outside, waiting for us. Fuck this shit. I'm not leaving the club. We notified the bouncers, and thankfully, they let us stay there until my dad was able to come pick us up from the front door, who had phoned. Me and my mate get in the car, and the only way out is to drive past them. They're banging on the window, and most of them putting their fingers across their throats. Which we all know what that signifies. But being our daft selves, we decide to shrug it off as idle threats. That was until a week later, while we were in high school. It was all over the local news. A shop owner on a precinct near to where we both lived had been brutally attacked and killed by a group of 20 or so kids, battered with metal pipes, pool cues, whatever was long and solid, along with multiple stamps and whatnot. That was when we realized that the threat was very real. They tried their usual tactic of inviting us out during this period of time between leaving the club and the murder, but we'd refused for obvious reasons. About 12 lads were arrested on murder suspicions. 4 were locked up for murder, some for accessory, some for stuff less serious. Close call. Not sure if the main culprits are out of prison yet, but a life sentence in England usually means 25 years. Only serving 2 to 3s and maybe less for good behaviour. And this was about 12 years ago, so who knows? I hope to God they're forgotten. Which I'm confident they have. God help me if I accidentally cross paths. So this takes place when I was in high school. I was in year 8, I think that's 7th grade in the US. On the first day back in school after the summer holidays, I had DT, Design and Technology, 3D Design, with this really old teacher called Mr. Fielden. He was probably about early to mid-60s if I had to guess. He had white shaved hair and had really bad breath. Apart from the bad breath, I didn't get any weird bad vibes from him. Until a few weeks into the school year. It started as little offhand comments such as, "Your hair looks nice today," and "That's a nice skirt," etc., etc. Nothing too weird, but a tad inappropriate to say to a 12-year-old girl. However, as the weeks started to go by, he became creepier and creepier. One day I was the first one waiting outside of class, when he came to the door and told me to come in, and not to be shy as he didn't bite. Weird. He then walked me over to my desk, and said how nice my hair looked again. Then he starts stroking my hair and telling me how shiny it looks, and how nice it smells. I seriously was starting to freak out, and was almost crying when thankfully someone else walked in and gave him a weird look. He shot me a creepy smile and walked away. About 2 weeks later, me and my friend were walking down the DT corridor at lunch, when we heard the door to his classroom open, and he was stood there telling us to come in and have lunch with him, We said no thank you as we had already ate. However, he kept persisting and saying his wife had baked a cake that he would share. We said no again and walked off. And we heard the door slam. Towards the end of the year, he started to become more touchy, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to get a teacher in trouble and cause someone to lose their job. Stupid, I know. The last day of the lesson, we started to pack up our things, and I had left my blazer and bag on the coat rack. I started to stand up, and he rushed over and told me that he would grab my things, and tried to put my blazer on me. I said no, it was okay. I was capable of getting them myself. He was so persistent, and there were other people in the class with me, so I eventually gave in. When we were all leaving, he winked at me and mouthed something to me. I brushed it off and left. Later that day, I was looking for my pen and found a note in my pocket. It said, "I'll miss you. D. X." At that point, I knew that D was Mr. D. Fielden, and that he was probably mouthing at me, telling me to check my pocket. I threw it in the bin and tried to forget about it. Thankfully, he retired at the end of the year and I never saw him again. But the other day I was speaking to my boyfriend's older sister, who also attended my school, and we were speaking about the various teachers we remembered. When I told her about dear old Mr. Fielden, she looked at me with a surprised expression and told me similar things had happened to her friends when they were in his class. Needless to say, I felt a tad bit sick, and I will forever regret my decision not to report him. So, Mr. Fielden, wherever you are, let's not meet ever again. I learned to figure skate when I was about 3 to 4 years old, and it was one of my favorite things to do as a kid. I kept pursuing my passion as I got older. In high school, I began skating, entering in competitions. My normal practice time was on Saturdays, late afternoon, early evening. But since we were preparing for a competition, my coach asked me if I would come in on a Wednesday after school, and I said I could. I went in early to get some extra practice during open skate time. It was around just after sunset, and my aunt dropped me off at the rink. And my ex-boyfriend, we had just broken up the week before, and he had already agreed to bring me home, was already there waiting for me. I was walking up. Ohio Skate's ice rink is set back in between 2 buildings, and a stairwell that goes down to a door into the building. I felt like I was being watched, but I figured I was being paranoid. Mistake number 1. And kept walking. I went in and sat down, and figured I'd run to the bathroom before I went out to skate. I was deciding if I wanted to put on my skates before I made the trip down to the bathroom or after. I decided after. Mistake number 2. The best way to describe the bathroom was more like a basement locker room. You had to go down a large staircase, and the woman's was straight ahead. And if you went to the left and around the staircase is the men's, and further down was the door to that staircase. There were a lot of people there that day, and the feeling of being watched went away until I walked down the staircase into the bathroom. It was one of those bathrooms that it's not a straight shot. It's one that you walk in and have to turn. I walked into the bathroom and felt the feeling of being watched again, and went into the second stall, which was the middle, mistake number 3, and there was one to either side, and the bathroom was vacant. I walk in and start to undress. I was wearing a skate dress that is almost like a leotard. That was long-sleeved, also wearing tights, so it was a task to get off. I have the dress and tights down, and set both my money and phone on the floor, and sit down to do my business. I hear someone walk in and knock on the door, and I respond, "Someone's in here." It was odd because both stalls were empty, And why would someone knock on the door I was in? The person walks over and flicks the light switch off and runs into the stall in my left. In my head, my first thought is someone is fucking with me. The person gets onto their hands and knees and starts reaching under the stall. It is very dark in this bathroom, with only a little light from the doorway. Just enough to see, but still very dark. I see a very large hand slide under the door and start feeling around. I freeze. At this point, I'm still wondering if it was my ex fucking with me. We were on good terms, it was a recent breakup, and I knew he was upset, trying to get a little payback. The hand feels my phone and cash on the floor. I am frozen and don't know what to do. I have never been paralyzed with fear before in my life. The hand touches my foot, and I still can't move, until it grabs my ankle. My skate dress and tights are down around my ankles, and I am barefoot, and grabs hard and tries to jerk it under the stall. My fear breaks, and I just get pissed. I scream, "Bitch, get off me!" and try kick the hand away. I always remembered as a kid that you never yell for help, that you yell fire, that someone is more likely to help, so I then scream at the top of my lungs, "Fire!" I know that there are people around the steps, and I'm a very loud girl, so I feel like someone had to hear me screaming. When I realize nobody is coming, I kick the guy's hand and pin it to the middle partition and hear a crack. This is the part that gets fuzzy. I see the guy pulls his hand back. I don't remember grabbing my phone, cash, or pulling up my tights and dress. I just ran as fast as I could up those stairs. At this point I'm crying and running up the stairs, still half undressed, not caring if anyone sees me. I run to the counter and tell the guy to call the cops, I've been attacked in the bathroom. And at this point, just now sliding my arm back into my dress. Of course it's the asshole I can't stand working. He's super lazy, and acts like when he's forced to actually do his job, it's the end of the world. And he just gives me this look like he doesn't believe me. At this point I'm hysterical. And the other guy that was working asks him what he's waiting for, and runs around the corner to go down to the bathroom to see if the guy is still there, while the asshole calls the police. I have a seat by my bag and wait for the police. It's only a few minutes before the campus police show up. They take my statement and check the bathroom. The officer proceeds to tell me that this isn't their first call like this, that it has happened a few times on campus. The guy working the counter is standing there, and they tell him that the door that leads to the outside stairwell was left unlocked. And the man followed me and walked down that stairwell and waited for someone to walk down. He then followed me into the bathroom. I'm now terrified of public bathrooms, and couldn't sleep in the dark for a long time. I refused to go to that bathroom by myself again, even after they changed the light switch to one where you need a key to turn it off or on. Every once in a while, I'll think of it, and wonder what would have happened if that man would have gotten me under that stall, or if he was still in the bathroom when I ran out, and why nobody came when they heard me screaming. So ladies, next time you go into a secluded bathroom, always make sure someone can hear you, or take someone with you. Creepy bathroom stalker. Let's not meet again. The creepy day starts with me and my sister getting dropped off at the mall. The mall is a large one in a large city. I was 14 and my sister 15 at the time. We weren't really shopping, just walking around talking. We decided to walk through an empty part of the mall that only led to the parkade. There used to be a bank and whatnot in that area, but they had recently closed it. It was even a little darker than the rest of the mall, it seemed, and a few people that passed through were only using it to exit to the parkade. When we were about halfway into the deserted area, we noticed that there were 3 guys hanging out. They looked to be around 25 to 30. They stopped us and started asking a bunch of questions. Personal questions like, how old are you? What are your names? Blah, blah, blah. I was uncomfortable, which wasn't surprising now that I look back. My sister put me in a lot of potentially bad situations, plus I had social anxiety and was shy. They were kind of blocking our way back to the rest of the mall at this point. They asked us to come hang out at their place with them, to which my sister said, sure. She tells them we will meet them across the street at 5, when we are done at the mall. They are creepily pumped, and accept this response. So then we say goodbye and go back to the main mall area. After we were out of earshot, I say, what the fuck? We are not going to meet them. She says, fuck no, I just said that to get away from them. We both had a bad vibe. The way it seemed they were trying to corner us in the deserted area of the mall. We walked out of the mall to leave around 5, forgetting by this time about our encounter, until we saw them waiting across the street. We had to take a bus home, so we booked it out of there to a bus stop they couldn't see. Luckily, they didn't see us leave. So at this point we are like, 3 creepy dudes, let's not meet ever again. But then we get on the city bus. I should mention that something about my sister attracts a lot of attention. My guess is huge boobs and long blonde hair. She looked about 20 when she was 15. We noticed a bus driver who appears to be around 40 years old staring at us. Really staring. Even when he starts driving, he is staring in the mirror. When he makes a stop, he offers us a piece of gum. My sister accepts, but I decline. Next stop was a terminal. We had to transfer buses at this point. He asks which bus you girls are getting on. We tell him, and he says he will radio the driver to make sure he waits for us. We say, okay, thanks, which was nice, because the bus we were on was a couple minutes late getting to the terminal. He radios the other driver, and before we get off, he gets out of his seat and starts professing his love for my sister. He is saying that she is so beautiful, and he can't live without her. And here is his number because he knows he will never meet someone like her ever again. He says all of this in front of a bus full of people. We had been sitting at the front of the bus, and she had only said like 2 or 3 sentences to him during the ride, which he prompted. By this time we are like, fucking disgusting men. Fuck no. So she just kind of mumbled, no, sorry, or something along those lines. And we then booked it off the bus and ran the rest of the way home. Fortunately, that was the last encounter for that day. This happened at least 3 years ago. Carl is a friend of mine, and he regularly would stay at my place until midnight, 1 a.m. He and I were 19 or 20 at the time, and both male. One particular night, we just finished watching a UFC event, and as always, I would walk him home. It was a 10-minute walk, and I didn't mind walking back home alone. The route leads through a tunnel for bicycles, with enough lights, a small bicycle path with lots of trees, and just a couple of lampposts every 50 meters. And finally, a good suburb where my friend lives. When we walked through the tunnel, a woman on a bicycle approached us from the other side, very slowly. She had long hair that covered parts of her face, big black glasses, and a big wide jaw, almost like a man. Her bicycle had a purple headlight. As she passed us by, she was whispering while looking at us. As we continued to walk, she stopped. We looked over our shoulder, and she was still whispering. We both had goosebumps, but we thought that ignoring her was the best bet. Once we got out of the tunnel, into the part with the tree-covered path, we looked behind us once again. She was there. That eerie purple headlight approached us, and Carl and I didn't really know how to react, so we froze. She stopped when she was maybe less than 10 meters removed, but still the whispering continued. Carl was both nervous and scared, so he yelled, "What the fuck are you doing? What are you saying? We can't hear you." She changed from whispering to speaking, but still very quickly. We slowly moved towards her so we could hear what she had to say to us. Carl had a skateboard in his hands, and he was ready to use it just in case. She suddenly stopped talking, turned around, and left off. The rest of the walk home, Carl and I checked our backs. It was definitely very creepy, but we did feel like we could handle her because we outnumbered her. I tried to think of some kind of explanation for her being there. There is a mental hospital less than a 2-minute walk away from there. I feel kind of bad for her because I am not sure what her intentions were, but she was definitely a confused soul. On the way back, when I was alone, I didn't see her anymore. I have to be honest, I ran all the way back. Never have I seen that purple light again. Hopefully, she got the help she needed and didn't scare too many people. Even though we won't meet again, because they're probably dead, I'll still tell my story. So when I was 6 years old, I was on holiday in Italy, as I go every year. And my mum had never been to Venice before, so my dad's mother, my mother, and I went to stay for 2 days. We went during the carnival season. I don't know what it's called, but hundreds of people dress up in masks and dresses and dance in the streets. It's really magical, but the streets are absolutely overflowing with people at this time of year. So we're making our way towards the big pizza through swarms of people. When I start playing Don't Step on the Cracks with the Pavement, I'm holding my mum's hand so we don't get separated. And since I was so short, I was practically invisible in the crowd. I'm getting really concentrated on not stepping on the cracks when I look up and I realize I'm not holding my mum's hand anymore. I start to panic, but tell myself to stay calm and look for her. I shout, "Mum! Mum!" But nothing can be heard over the music. The crowds clear a bit, and I get onto a quieter canal bridge and stand at the side saying, "Help! Help! I've lost my mum." At this age I couldn't speak Italian. I could only say the basics like "Ciao, come stai, come stai," etc., hoping someone speaks English. When at first this big tall man grabs my hand and says in broken English, "Come, come, I seen your mama, she wait for you." I say, "No, let me go," because he doesn't speak English well and won't understand as I think my hotel is nearby. But I shout it and it draws attention, so he lets go, just as an old couple come to me. They barely speak English at all, but the woman grabs my arm and says, "Come, we found your mama bellissima," calling me beautiful. As the old man pushes my back forward, and I start to panic again as she says, "You come casa, home with us." It was my last day and our train was leaving in a matter of hours, and I didn't have time to go to their house, nor want to, so I started screaming, "Basta, basta, stop, and no, let me go." When a woman comes up and in clear English says, "Is that a problem?" the woman lets me go and walks past with her husband. At this point, I know you're guessing she was another person trying to take me away, but she smiled at me and was really kind. I told her my situation, and we looked for my hotel but couldn't find it. So she took me to the police station, and my mother and Nonna had already put out a call for me. We came to the station, and everything was fine in the end. My mother was crying and thanking the woman, like you'd prayed to a god. I remember just laughing about it all. But I sometimes think now how different life could be if the man or the couple would have taken me. So I was 13 or 14 when this happened. I'm 27 now. There was this creepy kid in my school. He once choked my best friend's little sister. She may have been 4 at the time. He was always doing something horrible and bizarre, but adults often gave him a free pass because he had fetal alcohol syndrome. One time at lunch, I had gone home to shower because I had gym just before my lunch hour, and I didn't feel like showering at school. I heard a noise in the kitchen. Both my brother and my mom were not home, and I was home alone. We live in a very small town, so locking doors isn't something we did very often. Anyway, I get out of the shower, I have conditioner in my hair, and I go check on the noise. This creepy kid is standing in my kitchen, with his hand all bloodied up, and he's using our landline. I asked him what the fuck he was doing in my house, and he asked if he could use the phone. I told him to get out. This entire time I was just in a towel. He left, and I locked the doors and continued my shower. I go back to school after lunch, and I am sitting in my English class when I get called down to the office. I was that kid that was kind of a teacher's pet, so I had no idea what was going on. In the office is my mom. She worked as a school librarian and our principal. Apparently, our house had been broken into, but they couldn't determine what had been stolen other than my mom's cigarettes. At that point, I, my mom, and my brother all go home, taking the rest of the day off. I had told my mom about the kid coming in earlier, and so we had a suspicion that he had been the one to break in. We all start going through our things. I'm going through my drawers when I notice all of my underwear is covered in blood. I'm beyond creeped out, and I go tell my mom. We threw all of it out, and we went and bought new underwear. He always creeped me out, but after that I wouldn't go anywhere near him to save my life. I guess now he's part of a gang in Regina, Saskatchewan. And he has at least one kid. Creepy underwear man. Let's not meet again. Okay, so firstly, I'm a 17-year-old female living in Europe. This happened to me recently, and I feel like I need to write it down and tell to someone else. Me and my boyfriend, Carl, decided that it would be a nice idea to take a walk and hang out with our friend Dave when it was 7 p.m. It was already dark, as it is in wintertime, but we didn't think that anything would really happen. We just went to a shop and Dave bought some cola, crisps for us, and a pack of grape juice for his sister. Dave said we could hang out in this cool spot he knew. That turned out to be pretty dodgy. We threw some jokes around about how dodgy the small, unlit area looks, but decided to stay there for a moment, since apartment buildings were just literally next to us, and eat the crisps we had. Fast forward 5 minutes. Some weird Russian guys show up and ask us why we are just sitting there. Know that me and Dave are pretty socially awkward, so Carl did the speaking. He explained that we were just sitting and eating crisps. One of the two guys asked for our beer, to which we explained that it's just cola. Carl asked if they want us to leave, but the guys said we were free to stay. They proceeded to ask where we are from, to which my boyfriend replied that we live nearby, which in reality is like a 20-minute walk. And where I live, it's not really considered nearby. The guy asked us some of the same questions with a strong hint of Russian accent. And soon enough, they went away. We threw some jokes about how weird and creepy that was and thought about maybe going somewhere else. In a couple of minutes, one of the guys was back, and the other guy staying a few meters behind. Now he was asking for a phone, supposedly to call a friend so he could get home. He was trying to say that he's not from here, and that they both need a ride home, and his phone is dead. My boyfriend said he can't make calls from his phone, and Dave said the same. I'm a pretty absent-minded person, and I just said that I don't have a phone with me at the moment. The guy continued to try and get our phones. Red flags were going off, and Carl understood that the guy is trying to just take the phone away. He did indeed look like a stealing type. After Carl repeated several times that he can't make calls, the guy started to get irritated. "Just give me the phone, I can put in the SIM card. I just need to make the call." Carl replied with, "I don't really like giving my phone to strangers, dude." "Will you give me the phone or should I take it from you?" was the next aggressive answer. My boyfriend didn't want any problems, and he just started to back away and explain that he really doesn't want any problems. At this point, the guy started to speak fully in Russian, which I understand very poorly, and couldn't really translate what he was saying. But he was getting pretty aggressive and started to walk towards Carl. At one point, he reached into his jacket and pulled something out of it, but it was too dark to see what it was. According to Carl, it was something pen-like. After he had backed away towards the road, next to the spot, the guy tried to get Carl on the ground with a hit in the legs, but Carl managed to avoid it and keep his stance. I and Dave were backing away, and the other dude seemed to look from the distance, in case the other dude needs help, I guess. At this point, the attacker was really aggressive, and my boyfriend just pulled out his knife, that he always carries around, and yelled, "Dude, I have a knife, back off." That seemed to scare him, as he did in fact back off. This was an opening for me and Dave to run towards Carl, as they had taken their distance from us, and we started to run off. Before we did, however, the guy tried to taunt my boyfriend by yelling something like, "Come on, come here with the knife, come to your friends," while he was moving closer to the other guy. Me and Carl did run off to the nearby shop, and at some point, Dave vanished somewhere, only for us to find out that he had sprinted to his home and grabbed a fucking pipe in case he needed to beat the shit out of those two. But I'm just glad we got off safe and nothing too bad happened. I don't know what would have happened if my boyfriend wouldn't have his knife. What makes it a bit more creepy? Things like these don't really occur too often where I live, and if they do, there isn't some creep staying a few meters behind, just to watch and do nothing. I haven't noped out of some place as fast as this time, so random Russian muggers, let's not meet again. So a while back, I had some problems with alcohol and being really promiscuous, and basically no sense of danger, and just went with the flow. I have since then adapted and become more adultish. So one night, after a heavy night at the club, I apparently brought home a few people and had an after party. From what I remember, we had fun. And some not safe for work stuff might have happened. But I did in no way insinuate that I wanted to meet any of them again. So the next day, while heavily hungover, the doorbell rings and I'm like immediately pissed off. Like, leave me and my major headache alone. So I decide to pretend I'm not home. But this person does not give up, and after a while I hear some dude yell through the letterbox that he forgot his bus pass and just needed to look for it. And since I'm not a complete douche nozzle, I comply. When he has looked around for like 5 seconds, he sits down next to me and starts some sort of awkward small talk and tells me how beautiful I am, that I am the hottest girl in town. He uses like the most cliched slang I have ever heard in my life. Now mind you, I am ambivert, but not when I'm hungover, and I have major social anxiety issues when sober. Celebrating 1 week sobriety today, by the way. Yay me! And I don't like small talk, hugs, or people touching me. All this time I'm playing Borderlands 2, and I'm pretty engulfed in my mission. So add a little extra gamer rage to this abrupt interruption. But since I'm probably still a tiny bit drunk, and also a bit freaked out, Since I don't really know this guy, I decided to be polite and also tell him that I don't like it when people touch me. Not only did he continue the small talk, even though I was obviously not engaging him in it, but he also wouldn't stop touching me, telling me how we can be fuck buddies or whatever. I don't even remember. But that part is pretty irrelevant. I just told him that I wasn't interested in something like that, and when I finally decided I had enough, I asked him if he found his bus pass. Oh, I didn't actually lose it. I just wanted you to let me in so I could see you again. Now at this point, I'm freaking the fuck out. Because this is not okay. Lying to get into a girl's apartment. Who, to add to the creep factor, was home alone at the time. I can take care of myself, but I decided to keep my cool and just play it off like it was nothing, and pretend I had plans with my son and ex, and I had to leave. And thank Glob he actually left. He did actually give me his number before he left, so I sent a rant about how he should never ever do that to a person ever again, and also why it was so horrible, and I also included that the language he used became out of date in 2008. And then, I blocked his ass. My husband and I lived in our first apartment for about 5 years. It was in the business portion of the city. We had a park on one side, a business directly in front of us, blocking view of our apartment completely, and another business on the other side. We had a deck off the back that butted up against a huge hill. The deck doors were enormous, sliding glass doors that took up the entire wall of the living room. For lack of anywhere better to put it, our couch was up against the non-sliding portion of the doors, and there were vertical blinds that went across the entire thing. I have always had a problem with sleep, and am consequently usually awake until the morning hours. My husband is a police dispatcher, and worked overnight, so he was at work. It was about 2 a.m, and I had been watching Family Guy while lounging on the couch, but kept thinking I was hearing weird noises outside. So I turned off the TV and decided to sit quietly while browsing around on my computer, thinking I'd be able to identify the sounds and put my mildly paranoid mind at ease. Like I said, everything around us was businesses, so noises at 2 a.m. were pretty out of the ordinary. But I kept telling myself it could be animals or wind. I was playing a game on Facebook and heard what sounded like footsteps on my deck. I held my breath and waited, thinking it was probably just something that had fallen over. But I heard more footsteps. And then light, scraping on the door directly behind my head. I completely froze. All I could think was, do I get up and run? Or do I sit here and hope he hasn't seen me through the cracks in the blinds? My phone was across the room, so I would have to get up to get it. Then I had the perfect idea. I Facebook messaged my husband at work. A frantic message. Someone is on our deck right behind me. Within minutes, pretty much every cop that wasn't already at a call was at my apartment swarming the place. The sergeant told me they had caught him sneaking around back. He had been trying to pick the lock on the door. They had cuffed him, but they couldn't get him over the railing like that, so they would need to walk him out through the apartment. So I hid in my bedroom like a scaredy cat, while they brought him in and let him out. So would-be burglar, let's not meet. Just a bit of backstory. I'm a 23-year-old woman. I have bad sleeping problems and live in a pretty shitty part of town, where I live by myself in a small one-bed flat. For the last few months, there's been whisperings and talk of people seeing a shabby-looking man sneaking about near some houses, about 6 rows up from myself. I haven't really thought anything of it, as my next-door neighbour is more a nighttime person, and the old lady above me has 2 dogs, who so much as bark at a cat in the gardens. That was until a few weeks ago. As I said before, I have sleeping issues. Not exactly insomnia, but my body clock's a little fucked. I can't get to sleep till early hours of the morning. Anyways, a few weeks back, I was laying in my bed, reading an ebook on my tablet. I didn't have any lights on apart from the fairy lights entwined between the bars of my headboard. It was a pretty hot night, so I had the little window open that was next to my bed. It's a weird layout. I have one medium sort of sized window that takes up the whole left side. The bottom right is just plain glass, and the top is a tiny window that opens all the way out, but it's about the size of a standard book. So I'm laying there, reading, when I start hearing a vibrating noise from outside, like from someone's phone. I pulled back the curtain and looked out. Nothing. It was pitch black outside. I ignored it and went back to my book. At around 4 a.m., I was starting to get sleepy, so I pulled up the window and started getting comfy, ready for sleep. That's when I hear it again. That vibration sound, but as soon as it starts, it stops. I assumed I was hearing things, that my mind was making something out of nothing. But then I heard something that sent my blood cold. You know when you scrape a fork or knife on a plate, it makes that horrible sound. It was like that, but coming from my window. I didn't want to look. Didn't want to know. I'm just being paranoid. I wish I was just being paranoid for no reason. I heard another sound, like a handle rattling. I snapped awake, slid out of bed and crept to the foot of it. The rattling noise was getting worse, more angry and forceful. Grabbing a set of handcuffs, I leave there. Luckily for me, I'm kinda kinky and have a set of handcuffs on a long chain. One end is attached to the metal bars. I made sure they were ready. I reached for the cuffs and practically pulled them off. All I saw was an arm and a hand that was reaching through my little window trying to open the bigger one. I didn't hesitate. I slapped the cuff over his wrist before he pulled it out the window. That sure got his attention. So, little kitten likes to play rough, huh? Well... He leans into the glass, so close his breath is fogging it. Daddy likes... He finishes and starts thrashing, trying to get in. I bang on the wall between my room and the neighbor's, hoping he hears, and go to grab my phone off the windowsill, where I always leave it, but in my panic, I knock it off and something grabs my hair and pulls hard. Now this creep has me by the hair and he tries to reach through with his other hand. That now I see it, is holding a knife. I scream as he pulls my hair, ripping it out. The tears running down my cheeks. I grab his other arm, trying to push it away. Kitten, open the window. When I don't answer, he brings the knife closer. Do it now, or I'll have to cut up that pretty face. The dogs upstairs are going mad, and I scream again, trying to pull away. He pulls his other arm out and smashes my head against the window. That's when it happened. My neighbor barrels through the garden and almost tackles him to the floor. Almost being that he's still cuffed through my window. I run out through the kitchen to the back door, screaming for him to stop. Eventually he does. Turns out the old lady upstairs called the police, and my neighbor after that. When she told him what she heard, he came rushing home. The one night he was out partying. The police came and did their business and called paramedics for me and the creep. I had to go to hospital and get my head sorted. Split it open pretty bad, and ripped me a bald spot where my hair was. The creep got away with some cuts, a broken arm for where he was cuffed and tackled, and a fractured cheek. Turns out the guy was a convicted rapist, and had prior convictions for breaking and entering. I hate to think what would have happened if I'd taken my sleeping tablets and been knocked out, or if my other window was opened. So window creep, never fucking come to my window again, or next time. you will lose that arm. It was a Friday after New Year's. At 2 a.m. I heard the sound, a low, continuous moan. Think monster movie moans. It was so loud it caused me to look out my window to see if someone was on the second floor balcony. I live alone in an apartment complex that has 4 apartments per floor. The houses next to me, and across the lane, all belong to the same apartment community. The tenants park in the lane, myself included. There was no one on my balcony. But there was a lean, shirtless white man, with a tattoo on his left shoulder, sitting hunched on the back of my car. He was still moaning, a sound I had never heard a human make to that day. After a few moments of watching, I called 911 and informed the dispatcher of the situation. She tells me the police are on their way. I continued to watch the man through my blinds. This is when he started to scream. The man had crossed the lane to the vacant area between 2 houses opposite me. Beyond that is woods. The man was screaming at the woods for kicking him out. The woods kicked him out. Either the man was crazy, or he was kicking it with the woodland fairies, and I wasn't invited. Stupid fairies. The man turned around, and I thought he spotted me watching. I ducked. When I dared to look again, I saw the man crossing the lane, and this time he doesn't stop at my car. He's still moaning. He went to the sliding glass doors below my balcony and screamed, "Let me in, let me in, let me in." My neighbor's corgis, who was home alone, started to bark incessantly. I called the dispatcher again to tell her the man is now trying to break in the apartment below me, just as the cops show up. In the end, I had to open my window to tell the cops that the man did not live in the building. One cop came up to ask me more questions, because the moaning man turned attempted trespasser was too beat up and high, hungover, to tell the officers anything. They took him away in the ambulance. I still don't know if the moaning man saw me or remembers our eventful night. I now sleep with a taser next to my bed. I was 15 and on holiday to Hawaii with my family. You see, my dad and brother were a member of this golfing club. They would all hold competitions around the world, and each family was invited. Me and my mum would go along and laze around the pool, while the guys were away. Well, her best friend Lucy came along with us, and her husband Kyle was involved in this competition. She would join us in the daytime, and then have dinner with her family. Or just her and Kyle some nights. She was wonderful, and let me use her work laptop in her hotel room whenever I wanted. For the youngest person there, a laptop with internet on seemed like heaven for me. One night, it was myself, my mum, Lucy, and 3 other ladies from the competition, in the dining hall in the hotel. They were all sharing their 3rd bottle of wine, when Lucy's phone rang. It was Kyle literally screaming at her to get back to the hotel room because he couldn't find his best trousers, or something. Yes, that petty. She responded back that she had ironed them and they were in the wardrobe. More screaming from him on the phone. He continued shouting and swearing. Lucy said that she will go up to the room and show him where his trousers are. I remember my mum saying something along the lines of, "Why is he being like that? It's only some trousers." And the other 3 ladies agreed, and they all started bad-mouthing Kyle. "It's honestly fine, I'll be back in a bit." Lucy shrugged them off. I took this opportunity to grab my cardigan from the room. I always thought the hotel lifts were dodgy. They would take ages to open their doors, and numerous times I almost had a heart attack thinking that I was stuck in the lifts alone. Lucy was going up to our floor, and I quickly shot inside the lift with her. Well, the lifts opened to one seriously pissed off Kyle. He was waiting by the lifts, and as soon as he saw Lucy, he grabbed her by the hair and started dragging her back to the room. He was honestly calling her all the names under the sun, and she was struggling against him, trying to stop herself. I stood there in shock. I suddenly knew I had to do something. I was so enraged. How dare this man hurt such a lovely woman? My mum's best friend. I admit I was quite scrawny as a teenager, but I somehow managed to run up and push Kyle backwards. It was honestly like watching a cartoon. He stumbled backwards, let go of Lucy, and then came rushing at me. He grabbed me by the throat, pushed me against a wall, and suddenly started choking me. I kicked him in the groin. Fighting with my older brother came in handy, and Kyle just fell to the floor. Lucy grabbed me, and in a few seconds we were running down the hotel stairs to the lobby, with Kyle running after us. He kept shouting things saying he's going to kill us, and that I shouldn't have stuck my nose in, etc. We made it to the lobby, and ran over to my mum and the women. Kyle didn't follow. My mum tried to ring my dad numerous times, but it was on silent, being on a golf course and all. An hour and a half later, the guys had come back from playing golf. It turns out Kyle had started drinking during the day there, and had gotten so drunk that they had sent him back to the hotel. After looking at my neck and hearing from me and Lucy, a group of them went up to Kyle. I'm not sure what happened. I just know that my dad and brother shot up the stairs to the room as soon as they heard what happened, and some guys chased after them. We didn't see Kyle for the rest of the holiday, and Lucy has now divorced him. So the events of this story happened close to 2 years ago, but I have only just found out the full extent of them. My best friend Jack and I are extremely close, so much so that our own families even regard us as more like brother and sister than just best friends. This has caused some issues in his relationships, and even though he dates men, some of them have been jealous of our bond. So when Jack started dating Tanner, we were relieved that Tanner seemed to really like me, even before we met. In fact, Tanner seemed to like me a lot more than a stranger should. Jack would sometimes send Tanner selfies of the two of us together, and Tanner would always go on and on about how beautiful I was. We thought he just wanted to be nice. After a few weeks, Tanner got into the habit of texting Jack a few times a day about me. Make sure you tell her she's beautiful. Have you told her how wonderful she is today? Remind her of how lucky you are to have her. Eventually these kind of texts escalated to once every hour or so. Still, he seemed more desperate for approval and affection than creepy. Then came the day that Tanner and I met. I am very good at reading people, and something about him just seemed off to me. But Jack liked him, so I convinced myself that Tanner might just be shy or something. Also, he lived with his parents and siblings, and they were all extremely familiar with me. I was getting married and moving across the country in a couple of months, and I mentioned this fact multiple times, but they kept making references to events that they apparently expected me to attend, despite being months or even years away. Jack and I left after a few hours, and up until now, I assumed that was where the story ended. I mentioned Tanner to Jack the other day, and he finally told me everything that he had kept to himself before. He didn't want me to be freaked out. Apparently, after the visit, Tanner talked about me more and more with Jack, until I seemed to be their only topic of conversation. He was constantly asking when he would get to see me again. Due to the fact that I was working 2 jobs, planning a wedding, and preparing for a cross-country move, I didn't have a lot of time for socializing, which Jack explained. Then, one night, Tanner approached Jack with a shocking proposition. He wanted to have a threesome with Jack and me, despite neither of them being bisexual and the fact that I was engaged. Jack immediately shot him down, and Tanner played it off as if he was joking. But he never left it alone after that. He constantly pestered Jack, begging him to convince me to try a threesome with them. Jack continued to refuse, and even thought about ending the relationship. The final straw was when one night Tanner told him I could always just drug her. Jack immediately ended the relationship and cut off all ties with Tanner. This happened in September on my way to work. A bit of background information. I work at a mall that's actually rather close to my house. It's about a 3 to 5 minute walk away. I've been walking to the mall by myself since I was a kid, and I've never had any problems. Although there have been events over the last year on my path. There is a point on the way that's pretty creepy. There's a house to one side and a very high wall that you cannot climb over on the other. Needless to say, it's a freaky spot. Before my incident, 2 women were raped by a kid about my age, 18 to 20 years old. But the women were in their late 40s, and they caught the kid. So while I was nervous, I never thought something would happen to me. So it's early September of this year, and I'm walking to work. We don't have a uniform, but we are supposed to look put together. I was wearing a skirt and a rather low-cut top, but in my bag I had an undershirt I planned to put on once I got to the mall. And I was listening to my music through my earbuds. I started to approach the creepy area of the path when somebody stepped on my heels. He was following me so closely that he was stepping on the back of my sandals. I turned around to see a very tall man, maybe in his late 60s, just staring at me. He looked like an average guy. Clean black hair and stubble. But his stare looked angry. I assumed I was in his way, so I said an apology, expecting him to sidestep around me. He didn't. So I turned around and kept walking. But I made sure I didn't listen to my music. My earbuds were still in. This man started to talk to my back, as if he thought my music was still playing. He was saying very lewd things about his plans for me, my juicy ass, and some other very explicit content that still makes me shiver. He started to get close to me again, so I faked a call from my boss. I ran to the intersection I needed to cross, which led right into the parking lot of the mall. But there were so many cars I couldn't cross. I look over, and the man is shoulder to shoulder with me. It's about noon in broad daylight, and this man grabs my arm. I yanked my arm away and bolted across oncoming traffic, screaming for my life. Another pedestrian came running up to me. He asked me what was wrong. Crying, I explained that I don't know the man, who was now following me across the traffic, calling me Jen, which is not my name, and telling me to get back here, that I was worrying him. The pedestrian helping me quickly escorted me into the mall parking lot. The man was still chasing me, doing his limp-like run after me. He's dropped the name, and now he's just telling me to come back. I run into the store I work for and hid in the back room. My boss called security, because the man I told her about came in and kept asking me to come back to the car. He ran off later after security chased him, but they never caught him. I talked to the police, and they even ran this story on the evening news to try to catch the guy. But it's the end of February now, and they still haven't got him. I don't listen to music on my walks to work anymore. Sometimes co-workers will either drive me home, or at least wait with me until I do get a ride from someone I know. I'm terrified to be alone in the parking lot now. So, to the creepy guy calling me Jen, let's never ever meet again. Hey everyone, a very tired hill freezer here. You know, last special I ended up recording the bulk of the audio in one sitting, so I assured myself I wasn't going to do that this time. So of course that's exactly what I ended up doing. Ah well, worth it in the long run. I'd been shooting for 20 stories this time. Last one was 15. I didn't want to say that up front though in case I didn't get them, but I was very fortunate and I got more than the 20. I think I actually got about 25 all in all, but a couple of them were deleted by the time I'd actually went to save them, unfortunately. But that's the way it goes sometimes. If you enjoyed this video, and you know anyone else who might also enjoy it that isn't subscribed to me, please do share it with them. That always helps me out, so I'd be grateful if you did so. Anyway, I think I've bent your ear long enough, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.